fern research. My name is Ana Nino, and I'm the librarian here at the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. This art exhibition represents a culmination of efforts between a local artist and our research staff to illuminate, as it were, the research activities and collections that we have here in this building and on this campus, but that we also perform abroad. I'd like to acknowledge the organizations and the efforts and the individuals who have helped to make this exhibition possible, starting with the National Science Foundation, which has generously funded the Ferns of Colombia project, a 4-year project, also known as Helechos de Colombia, which is spearheaded by our very own Dr. Alejandra Vasco. Yes, and also her colleagues, Dr. Weston Testo and Dr. Michael Sundu, who is in here somewhere. So, yay! We'd also like to thank the University of North Texas's Scholarly and Creative Design Award for providing funding for this exhibit. And then in terms of the micro level, I'd like to thank individuals who made this exhibition possible, notably our former community education manager, Erin Starr White, for planting the seed. So, yeah, thank you for serving as the glue between this local artist and our research staff. And then I would like to thank our staff here at the garden and at this Botanical Research Institute, from folks in the herbarium who have been pulling fern specimens, to the facilities people who've been moving lights, events who've been moving tables and chairs, education. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, but thank you all, because we couldn't have done this without you. So I'd like to ground us in this place and time by reading a land acknowledgement statement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Fort Worth Botanic Garden is located on traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of all Indigenous peoples who were sustained by these lands and give thanks to them. We are grateful that these lands continue to provide enrichment for many people today. And so I'd like to begin our introductions by starting our introductions with Dorneth Doherty. Dorneth Doherty is a 2012 Guggenheim Foundation Fellow and American artist working primarily with photography, video, and scientific imaging. She received a BA from Rice University and an MFA in photography from Yale University. Doherty lives in Dallas and is Distinguished Research Professor at the University of North Texas, where she has been on the faculty since 1996. In addition to the Guggenheim Fellowship, she has received grants from the Fulbright Foundation, the Japan Foundation, and the United States Department of the Interior. Artists in residencies include Museum of Contemporary Art Toronto, Carey Institute for Ecosystem Studies, and Botanical Research Institute of Texas. Recent exhibitions include Unsettled Natures, Artists Reflect on the Age of Human, which was at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, Washington, D.C., Archiving Eden, Exchange, Museum of Contemporary Art, Toronto, Seedscapes, Future-Proofing Nature, Royal Albert Memorial Museum, Exeter, England, Dorneth Doherty, Archiving Eden, National Academy of Sciences, Washington, D.C., and Companion Species, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Bentonville, Arkansas. Her work has been shown and collected extensively in the United States and abroad. Next is Alejandra Vasco. Alejandra Vasco is a research botanist at the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. She received a PhD in biology from the City University of New York and the New York Botanical Garden, and a BS in biology from the Universidad de Antioquia, Colombia. Alejandra's research focus is on the diversity and evolution of ferns. Together with colleagues Weston Testo and Michael Sundu, Alejandra leads Ferns of Colombia, a project funded by the National Science Foundation to document and explore the high diversity of ferns in Colombia. Tiana Raymond. Tiana Raymond is the Herbarium Director at the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, where she has worked since 2009. She received a Master's of Science in Environmental Science from Texas Christian University and a BS in Environmental Science and a BA in Cultural Anthropology from Southern Methodist University. As the Brit Herbarium Director, Tiana oversees nearly 1.5 million herbarium specimens, microscope slides, microphotographs, and liquid preserved collections. Lastly, me. Anna Nino is the librarian at the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. She received a BA from Cornell University in Science and Technology Studies and an MS in Library and Information Science from the University of North Texas. As the Brit librarian, I facilitate research and manage library archival and art collections. Third person, weird. So we will dive into our panel discussion, and while I may direct specific questions to a certain individual, I just want to invite us all to pitch in and contribute our perspectives whenever you feel compelled. So first of all, Dornith, I'd like to understand your collaboration with Brit and what brought you here, and then if you could also just share about the creation of these artworks, which are all three very distinct visual artworks, and what you're trying to say with them.
You want me to hold mine? Yes. Well, I have to thank Erin White for inviting me to have an exhibition. Originally, she had invited me to show a very long-term project I've been working on for about 15 years, which is Archiving Eden, which is about the global system of seed banks around the world. And it was my Guggenheim project. But in talking with her, it became obvious that there might be a possibility of developing new work through collaborating here at the Brit campus. And so the first person she introduced me to was Tiana, who was so generous and showed me the specimens that they had in the herbarium. And I came across a collection of slides made plant clearings made in 1956, and they were tiny, tiny pieces of ferns and other leaves that had been cleared, meaning just stained and only leaving just part of the tissue, so they became translucent. And it reminded me immediately of slides and the history of photographic slides, how sometimes people think that they're going extinct, but they're not. And I was just so in love with their beauty that I wanted to make the piece that hopefully you've seen upstairs on the second floor. And one of the reasons it's on the glass is to recall that of the glass pieces of the ferns. And as I worked there, I met Ale, and Ale was doing this really amazing project in Colombia. And I, through conversations with her over lunch, this has just been the most welcoming group of people. Y'all can't imagine what it's like to work with collaborators that are as generous and as smart and as informed as these three women are. And I also, when you were thanking staff, I have to thank Erin, who climbed out on the roof tonight and put the lights I brought behind the windows upstairs so you could see it like as if it was daytime. So thank you, Erin. Ale allowed me to photograph her. She is doing a discovery project of trying to document the ferns, biodiversity of ferns in Colombia. And they have been discovering new species. They have seen species that have not been seen in 80 years because of the political and social unrest in part of that country. And so as she's bringing these out, and they are encased in the newspapers where they dry them, I started seeing the headlines. And since I speak Spanish, I was able to see that embodied, kind of pressed together, almost in this physical way, the ferns themselves were embedded in the news headlines. So as I'm photographing them and looking at them, I'm realizing that at the same time that you have a natural history collection, you have a simultaneous social and cultural historical collection. And so that simultaneity of that became really a profound way to think about our time right now and how we're dealing with the challenges that face us, including climate change, of course, and biodiversity loss. But what was interesting to me also was that in a conversation with Tiana, she had talked about herbariums being important for natural history collections in general because they create a timeline. You know something, a piece of fern, one plant was in one spot at a particular time and in a particular place. And so that notion of a timeline and the history between the 1956 collection and then this current day collection of Columbian ferns in the face of all this change and biodiversity loss became really profoundly interesting. And then, talking to Ali again, she's talking about the DNA research she's doing. And so one of the reasons that there's a projection tonight is because of the data that she's doing. Eventually that video will be all 400 species that they're collecting. So it's just the beginning of it as this video will get longer and longer and more complex as the DNA grows and the fern collection grows. But for me, what's interesting is this sense of the arc of scientific processes, these extinction events that things survive against the odds, especially ferns. If you think about it, ferns are some of the oldest plants on the planet. They existed before trees and leaves. I mean, trees with seeds, plants with seeds. And so all of that came together for me to make it seem interesting and important to only have this projection tonight. So the ephemerality of the data, the disembodiment of it, and then of course the paper ferns are on paper, the slides are on glass, and then the data is just going to evaporate. So anyway, so that's my story, and I'll answer questions. But Ale.
I hope it doesn't evaporate, actually. I need those data to really last for a long time, as the collections we have here. But that was really interesting, and with Dorney, it was really great, the interaction when she was coming here at the beginning and Erin, we have two Erins here in the audience that we have to thank, but Erin will start bringing Dorney to us, and I was like, oh, what is she doing? And then Dorney was so excited about every single object that we use in research here. So not only the collections, the slides, but also the DNA. And so just being with her brought a different perspective to the things that we use, the artifacts we use every day on research. Because we know what is the importance of that, of those objects for research and for keeping all these biodiversity and to study the diversity, but also seeing them through Dorney's eyes also brought all this beauty to perspective. I do think plants are amazing and ferns are the most beautiful plants, don't get me wrong, but I think seeing also the beauty that Dorney saw in those collections, it brings also a different layer of amazement and of excitement about research. And I always say that sometimes research is a very lonely process. You have to really be focused on what you're doing, and you don't want to talk to anybody while you're doing your research because you are doing complex things. So just having a collaboration, and even like with Dorney, I got closer to the library with Anna, and I got closer to the herbarium, just because that this is so facilitating us to talk about even over lunch, because yeah, sometimes when you do research, you really need to be focusing, and we really need to let our researchers do that at some point, you know, so that we can produce the things. But that was really amazing. And the other thing that it's beautiful that I think about the project is that we are trying to really, we are racing against time to understand the diversity of Earth. Not only of Colombia. Colombia is a very rich country in on the top of the northern tip of South America, but we are really racing against time to understand our diversity of plants, of organisms, and I'm saying racing because there's so many impacts that we are doing, the human impacts on biodiversity, that researchers, we are really racing against time to really know this diversity. So it's great also to be able to bring that perspective to you in the sense of these past, present, and future scenarios that Dornet is proposing to us. And I will give now the microphone to Tiana and maybe ask her about the collections. What can you tell us about that?
So actually, when all of you were speaking, I had a few ideas, and I've lost maybe most of them. Except for the idea, the concept of discovery that Alejandra was just talking about. We talked about, Dorna's actually, okay, and I need to explain a little bit more about her story, because I actually showed her a different collection, and she asked if she could snoop around and have a look more, and she discovered the Howard Arnott collection on her own, mostly. In our collection, like any good natural history collection, we have lots of skeletons. They just have to be skeleton leaves. But she discovered that one on her own. With almost 1.5 million objects in our collection, we don't have the time. We have the time to give them a good home. We have the time to try to make them accessible. We seek funding to do that. But we do rely on experts like Michael, who's visiting us right now, annotating our material, looking at our material, and artists as well, looking at that material and finding the stories there. We hold these specimens in public trust that they will last for hundreds of years, because we don't know what technologies we will have that will be able to uncover new stories from the specimens. But there's still the time. It's 1.5 million objects, and that's just our collection, right? And so, so Dornet has done us a service by looking even further into this particular collector and his work. And so racing against time is a matter of being out there now and studying the organisms that exist, but there's so many untold stories and discoveries to be had in the collections that exist into the past, which is a project that is happening with the Ferns of Columbia project. They're looking also at legacy collections that have been made in the past to give perspective on the new things that they're collecting. So that's one of the things I really enjoyed about this exhibit is that the sense of discovery in the old and the new and into the future and the possibilities. And it's rather funny, speaking of Howard Arnott, just tonight I was just Googling his name, just trying to bring some of the fresh things up to my mind. And I found an article, so he was very involved with the Texas Society of Microscopy. In fact, I think he was president at some point. And he published an article there in 2010, and it was called A Retrospective on Old Microscope Slides. And the idea, it was a 2-page paper. One page was a full plate of images, including some of similar slides to what you've got upstairs. And the one-page paper was his commentary on the idea that these slides, when they're properly preserved and they're done in the right way with the right techniques, they can last hundreds of years, even those slides. Well, actually, I think some of the ones he looked at were about 100 years old. But he looked, for example, the yucca and some of his earlier work, he looked back at some of his slides and he was discovering new things from those preparations. So it just goes to tell that these objects, we try to preserve them in a moment in time, but we look at them with new eyes. Every year goes by, different people, different technologies. And so this has been exciting to see this come to life in a new light with a new perspective. And so I hope all of you had the chance to look around and see that yourselves and bring your own stories to it. And I hope you'll tell us those stories.
I was just going to make a remark too about how I think it's interesting with regards to the fern artworks, the substrate of the newspaper, and how I think we have witnessed many foretellings of the disappearance of the newspaper as a medium, and yet here it still persists. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not fighting for dear life, but yeah, I mean, even that as a layer of, it clinging on to existence, So I think that's very fascinating. Ale, I want you to explain more about the importance of collecting, and not only that, but how in botany there tends to be now this sharing of knowledge. We were talking the other day about how in the past you had to go visit herbaria physically to access collections, but nowadays with photography, for instance, in probing into the usage of photography within the field of botany, how folks can share information digitally and they don't have to basically travel from herbarium to herbarium to conduct research.
Yeah, that's actually, this has two layers also. Now that we're talking about past, present, and future, right? Like different layers of timing. So photography has been changing botany a lot, and a lot of people were really scared that when photography came, nobody was going to use the specimens anymore. And so we realized that no, I mean, having a specimen in front of you is the ultimate thing when you do research. But now photography is also allowing us to share the knowledge, because now we can put those photographs of those specimens online. So coupled with the internet, and wherever you are, you can see those collections. And that has been really accelerating and open these big possibilities of people to collaborate, because I don't need to go to every single collection to be able to see a specimen. I can just log into my computer and see like a small collection that is, let's say, a very small collection in a small town that I'm not necessarily going, because normally botanists go to the biggest collections where you think you're going to find more specimens, but I will be able to see that collection online and see if there's anything that I'm interested in or that I'm an expert in that I can contribute to that collection. But also it has opened the possibilities for people from other countries, mostly from the global south, to really get to see some of their collections that are here in North America, but most of them are many collections that we have come from the global south. But sometimes people from the global south, they don't have the resources to come to the biggest herbarium in the north to look for them and study them. But now with digitization, with the availability of those images through the internet, it has opened all these collaboration between both the northern botanists and the global south botanists. So I think that's very beautiful. And another very beautiful thing is that I do think in botany, normally people really collaborate. We share information. There's no like, oh, I'm just not showing you this. We want this information to be out so that you can do good science. And I think this is very beautiful from botany. And maybe this can tie out back to the library. How has like libraries also share knowledge?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think the ethos of libraries is all about access to information, free access to information, and the library, the Botanical Library, serves an interesting role in all of this in terms of providing these primary resources that contain descriptions of species when they were first discovered, as well as giving you information about where species grow in different geographic regions through floras. And so you've got the monographs, you've got journal articles, which botanists heavily rely upon. And we also are looking toward digitization too, largely, in order to provide access to our materials to folks who may not be able to enter our doors or can't travel. And for instance, one particular project that we're engaged in here at Britt Library is another National Science Foundation funded grant to digitize a field botanist named Dr. Sherwin Carlquist's color-positive slides mostly, but also some other transmissive film. And I just think it's funny, this parallel between these transparencies, these slides of different formats. And yeah, it's like 150,000 slides just about, and we plan on digitizing them and putting them up on the web with the information about where this individual collected these plant specimens and took pictures of them. And the goal is to link the photos to the physical specimens that are housed at California Botanic Garden, and to basically create a network between the two so that you can better understand them in context. So they're talking to one another. It's not just these digitized objects that you don't know about this one that exists over here, how it complements the other. And this goes into what in botany and natural history folks are calling the extended specimen network, wherein the specimen acts as sort of this core of this network or diagram in which that's the primary resource. You can't replace that. And then you have these secondary versions or preparations of that given resource, whether it's a photograph of it, soil sample where that plant was grown, its DNA sequence material, and so forth. And so it's about creating greater context and interconnectedness that gives you more knowledge about a given object that you're looking at on the web. Because, of course, when you're looking at something on the web, you don't really have that tangible experience, and it can be a little bit harder to put those things together and connect those dots. So I think that there's a lot of interconnectedness between what's going on here with the herbarium and what we're doing in the library. So, yeah.
So maybe we should. I can wait.
I can't wait for Dorney's next exhibition with those big specimens that Anna's doing.
Yeah, I like that.
Should we take questions?
We want to give you.
If anyone has a question, I can walk the microphone to you. Does anyone have anything they'd like
I'm
to say?
assuming they're going to ask me.
It was actually interesting listening to Dorn talk about, the newspaper that was used to sort of try out the leaves. So when you do collect ferns, and this is for Ale, do you geotag the location?
It's on.
Oh, yeah. Like georeference?
Yeah,
You mean
how,
like, so
you
the
take a picture.
coordinates and
Yeah,
everything?
the coordinates.
Yes. So when we go to the field and collect ferns, we take so many data, as many data as we can. And one is the coordinates. And we take them very seriously, and one person of the team is always in charge of that, because you want to be able to go again in case somebody, for example, finds it's a new species, or it's very interesting, or it's a rare species that needs preservation or conservation assessments. So we always georeference, and we always take a lot of pictures before we collect the plant too, so that we can have like a photograph of the live plants before we put them in newspapers to bring them here to study. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, I saw fingers pointing, but I'm not sure who they were pointing at. Michelle, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I can launch this to you, but I would hurt something.
Yeah, that doesn't sound
So this one's more for Dornith. We already talked about the 3 different styles and how very different they are from each other. One of the things that's really obvious is the color differences in each section. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how that came to be.
The window piece, it was the specimens themselves had aged, and the material they were embalmed in had started aging and turning yellow. So it was almost like they were encased in amber. It was so beautiful. So that explains the colors. Those colors are similar. And then the DNA digital piece, that was much more intuitive, and I had started in a place where I was referring to the colors that you found in the newspapers, and then that turned out to be all colors. And so I had been doing tests and iterative process in making that video, and so it got, just brighter and brighter. So it's like the brightest, most colorful thing I think I've ever made, and it's just completely out of control. So, and then the newspapers, I really liked the way that when they're somewhat tonally inverted, the color has been manipulated in a variety of ways, but I inverted the color on the ferns because I thought that it made them, have that kind of ghostly, skeletal, almost fossilized appearance that I really felt like got at the core of what I was after in those pieces.
With the blue that's in the newspaper pieces, it really made me think of cyanotypes paired with the white, so I was wondering if that was maybe part of the inspiration as well.
Yeah. You can't, yeah, you can't get away from it. Well, you know, okay, so there's a really famous 19th century photographer that people compare my work to, especially the seed bank work to all the time, which is Anna Atkins. She was like the first, she published the first photo book. It was cyanotypes. It was algae. It was a scientific book of illustrations of algae. And so she also did a book of ferns in cyanotype. So there is, if you scratch the surface, there's always a photo connection in my work. Yeah, so there's a photo history there. That was a
There
good
was,
question. Oh,
Yep. Coming over there.
So for the Ferns of Colombia project, you're cataloging all these different species. So part of that is probably going to be looking at the range, especially if it's something new. So like how far do you walk before you collect another sample, like a mile, 2 miles?
It depends. It depends where we are in terms of how close, for example, the forests are. Sometimes, so we work in places that are undersampled, but many of those new species are actually already collected in natural history collections. Is that we don't have specialists or people haven't been working on those particular groups. So sometimes you discover species that have been in a natural history collection 30, 50, 100 years. When we go to a field and we collect, sometimes we walk a mile, sometimes we are in the car and we just hop off the car and collect what it, like close to the road. And sometimes we walk 10 miles, 19 kilometers, just to go to the top of a mountain and collect. So when we do the expeditions, it's really, it depends where you go, but we walk quite a bit. My iPhone, I take it to take photos, and whenever I'm here in Texas, it's like 5,000 steps, right? And when I go to a field, it's like, what are you doing? It's like 20,000 steps every day. So it does change a little bit, but yeah, field work is fun, but it's really, you have to walk a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, I was really interested in the phrase that you brought up, Anna, the extended specimen network, and thinking too, Dornith, about using your art as a way of sort of cataloging the specimen and archiving the specimens and their social context. Thinking too about the place of art in the archive, in the catalog. Do you consider your pieces a part of the extended specimen network?
That's a very good question. Thank you. That was really, well, yes, of course, right?
We're gonna put it. Great.
And I guess, sorry, really quickly, Ale in particular, how, well, both of y'all, how do you work with cataloging the art in relationship to the specimens?
That was going to be my follow-up, because the answer was yes, but the answer is also that there's no easy linkages between that kind of thing. So those kinds of data haven't been easily linked. We're still working with linking some of the more tangible, direct connections. So I think it's a linkage that hasn't been well explored. So that was a pretty good question. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because it was a good follow-up. But Ale, you have a follow-up?
But also let me know that I've been telling Dornith, and Dornith has been really great. It's like, Dornith, don't mix this up. Just let me know which one did you photograph, what is the number, so that I can know what specimen it belongs to. Because when we bring specimens back, we have 1,000. We have probably 1,000 specimens already that we have brought back from ferns. And so I was really nervous. I was like, Dornith, you have to tell me which one you are photographing, just annotate the number. Dornith has been great. But maybe it will become part of the extended specimen. As Tiana was saying, we don't have like a database now but at least now we have these pieces and we know which specimens they belong to. And Dornith was great at following my obsessiveness about just not mixing scientific data. I really wanted to know which ones she was photographing.
Actually, yes, I'm going to actually follow up that a little longer, that she was really great about doing that with the slides as well. And when those do get cataloged in our system, there will be a database field where we can put that information. It's just not going to be a live connection. So, so hopefully that live connection between the two will be something that happens in the future.
It's an interesting thing to think about. Well, we've been talking for 40 minutes, so we should probably stop. Right? And there's one person who's dying to ask a question.
Brenda?
How long did it take you to put this exhibition together? How long have you been working on this show?
I've been working on this show for 2 years.
And will it travel anywhere else?
It might. We don't have plans for it right now. I'm just so happy that it's done, and that tech problems with that one night only projection with no time to, no way to test it before the guy showed up. Right, I was like, I'm telling everybody it's one night, and there's, I hope it works. And then sure enough, it was great person.
Looks very good.
I should thank Colin, if he's in the room, for coming and setting it up and, doing it perfectly. So, yeah, that's in the future. I'm, I'm just happy that it all worked. So.
All right, everyone, well, please feel free to enjoy the artwork. Thank you all again for joining us, and we hope you have a great evening.